The first sign that my marriage was falling apart wasn't some dramatic discovery. No lipstick on a collar, no mysterious receipts, no hushed phone calls in the middle of the night. Nope. It was a Wednesday. A completely ordinary, forgettable Wednesday, the kind that blurs together with all the other middle-of-the-week slogs. I was standing in the kitchen, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember why I had even walked in there. And then Rachel walked past me. Not in a normal, "Hey honey, I'm just grabbing a glass of water" kind of way. No, she floated by, barely even registering my existence, moving with a weird kind of grace that had no business being in our house at 9:42 p.m. on a Wednesday. She wasn't wearing anything special, just a simple t-shirt and jeans, but she had this aura. Like she was carrying a secret, something electric buzzing just beneath her skin. I narrowed my eyes. "Are you high?" That got her attention. She stopped mid-step, frowned at me, and then rolled her eyes. "Excuse me. I asked if you're high. You're walking around like you just got back from a meditation retreat where they only let you eat kale and whisper motivational quotes to each other." She sighed, long-suffering. "I'm just in a good mood, Alexander." Is that a crime? It wasn't. But something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. Rachel wasn't exactly the random good mood type. She was the meticulously planned good mood type. If she was happy, there was a scheduled reason for it. So naturally, I did what any sane husband would do. I stared at her, arms crossed, waiting for the explanation. And then she did something that made my entire body go cold. She smiled at me. "Now, I know what you're thinking. Alex, you absolute moron, your wife smiled at you, and you're acting like you just saw a ghost. But you don't understand. This wasn't a normal smile. This was a smile I hadn't seen in years. A smile that belonged to a different time, to a different version of Rachel. This was the smile she used to give me when we were first dating, back when we were two broke college kids living off gas station coffee and blind optimism. It was the kind of smile that made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world. And now? Now it felt like I was standing in someone else's story. Rachel never smiled at me like that anymore. So, naturally, I panicked. "All right, who are you, and what have you done with my wife?" I joked, aiming for lighthearted but landing somewhere closer to paranoid. Rachel just shook her head, still smiling, and disappeared into the bathroom. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, feeling like I had just witnessed something I wasn't supposed to see. But then, life went on. For the next few days, Rachel was different. Not in a dramatic way, but in the way that makes you feel like your world has shifted just slightly off-center. She laughed more. She hummed under her breath. She spent more time in front of the mirror, fixing her hair, touching up her makeup. She didn't ask me about my day as much, but when she did, she'd tilt her head to the side like she was studying me, like I was an interesting puzzle she hadn't quite figured out yet. And then came the moment of truth. Friday night. Rachel was out with her friends, something that used to be rare but had suddenly become a weekly occurrence. I was on the couch, flipping through the channels, pretending I was actually invested in whatever late-night talk show was on. That's when I heard it. A knock at the door. Not a normal, neighbor needs sugar knock. No, this was a hesitant, slightly guilty knock. The kind that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I opened the door to find a man standing there. Mid-40s, decent suit, the kind of face you'd forget the moment you looked away. He gave me a polite nod, his hands shoved into his pockets like he wasn't quite sure what to do with them. "Alexander?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, mostly because I was too busy trying to figure out why I suddenly felt like I was about to get bad news. "Who's asking?" I finally said. He let out a breath, looking at me the way doctors do right before they tell you something you don't want to hear. "My name's Daniel." He hesitated, as if deciding whether or not to continue. Then, finally, "I think we need to talk about your wife." It took me a second to process that. And then, because my brain apparently wasn't interested in cooperating, the only thing I could come up with was, "Well, that's not ominous at all." Daniel gave me a tight-lipped smile. "Yeah, sorry about that." I didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there, waiting. Daniel sighed and ran a hand through his hair, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Listen, man. I wasn't sure if I should come here, but he stopped himself, then started again. "I've been seeing Rachel." It took a second for that to register. And when it did, my first reaction wasn't anger or sadness or even disbelief. No, my first reaction was sheer, dumb confusion. I frowned. "You mean, like, you ran into her at the grocery store or something?" Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, Alexander. I mean, I've been seeing Rachel. For a while now. Silence. The kind of silence that feels like it could crack the walls. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The suit. The tired eyes. The way he was shifting on his feet like he wanted to be anywhere but here. And then, something clicked. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly. Okay, I said. I have one question. Daniel nodded. Yeah, anything. I leaned against the door frame, crossed my arms. Why the hell are you telling me this? That caught him off guard. He blinked. What? You heard me. Why are you here? Why are you telling me this? Because I gotta be honest, if you were looking for a dramatic showdown, I don't have the energy for that. Daniel ran a hand over his face. Look, I didn't plan on this, okay? But Rachel and it's over. She doesn't know it yet, but it is. And he paused, shaking his head. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't want you to be the last to know. Something about the way he said that made my stomach churn. Rachel didn't know it yet. So, what? He was breaking up with my wife, and I was supposed to be grateful for the heads up? I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Well, that's just great. Daniel winced. I really am sorry, man. I didn't answer. I just stood there, staring at him, feeling like I had just stepped into someone else's life. Daniel was still standing there, looking like a man who had just realized he made a terrible decision but was too far in to back out. I didn't say anything for a good 10 seconds, letting the weight of the situation really sink in. Not for me, for him. Because I wanted him to feel every bit of how ridiculous this was. So, let me get this straight, I finally said. You came all the way to my house to tell me that you've been seeing my wife, but you're breaking up with her, and for some reason, I need to be in the loop? Daniel shifted on his feet. I just thought you should hear it from me. That's so thoughtful, I said, crossing my arms. And let me guess, you were expecting some kind of reaction? Maybe I was supposed to throw a dramatic fit, storm off into the night, or, I don't know, challenge you to a duel. He exhaled through his nose, clearly regretting his life choices. I don't know what I expected, man, but I felt like I owed it to you. Yeah? And how's that working out for you? He rubbed his jaw, avoiding eye contact. Not great. Shocking. Silence. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him. He wasn't some suave homewrecker, that much was obvious. He had the energy of a guy who had ordered something online and only just realized he wasn't getting a refund. All right, I said, pushing off the frame. You did your part, congrats. You came clean, got your moral points. Now, what do you want? A handshake? A certificate of honesty? Maybe a nice, I forgive you gift basket. Daniel looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him. Look, I'm sorry, okay? But I didn't come here for anything other than to tell you the truth. The truth, I repeated. Right. You cheated with my wife, but now that it's inconvenient for you, you're dropping her, and I get to clean up the mess. Real noble of you, Daniel. He winced. I deserve that. Oh, you deserve a lot more, buddy, but unfortunately for you, I'm too exhausted to be creative right now. More silence. So, I said, clapping my hands together, since you seem to be in the business of full disclosure, let's make this interesting. How long has this been going on? Daniel hesitated. About 6 months. I let out a low whistle. 6 months. And you're just now realizing it was a bad idea. No, don't answer that, I interrupted. I don't actually care. But tell me something, Daniel. What was the moment? The exact moment where you looked at my wife and thought, yep, I should definitely inform her husband that I've been messing around with her for half a year. He swallowed hard. It wasn't one moment. I don't know. I couldn't keep doing it. It felt wrong. I stared at him. Oh, now it feels wrong? He sighed. Look, I'm a fool, okay? I know that. I got caught up in it. I told myself it wasn't serious, and then he stopped, shaking his head. It got serious. I raised an eyebrow. Serious how? He hesitated. She started talking about leaving you. I let out a short laugh. Did she? In what? You didn't want to be stuck with her full time. His silence was all the answer I needed. I grinned. Well, you really thought you were different, didn't you? Daniel looked uncomfortable. It wasn't like that. Sure it wasn't. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly done with this conversation but knowing he couldn't just walk away yet. Look, I just wanted to do the right thing. Yeah, I said, nodding. And you're doing such a great job. He sighed again, checking his watch like he had an appointment to get to, as if this was just some awkward coffee date he couldn't wait to escape. I tilted my head. What's the rush, Daniel? Got somewhere to be. He shifted. I just didn't expect this to go on this long. Oh, my deepest apologies, I said, putting a hand on my chest. Next time my wife's boyfriend comes over to tell me she's been cheating, I'll be sure to speed things up for his convenience. He had the decency to look embarrassed. I exhaled, finally tired of this ridiculous exchange. All right, Daniel. Thanks for the update. You've been an absolute delight. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to enjoy the rest of my evening in ignorance, just like I was before you knocked on my door. He nodded, clearly eager to escape. Yeah, right. I'll go. Please do. He turned, heading back down the walkway like a man who had just delivered bad news and realized he still had to deal with the consequences. I shut the door, locking it behind me. Then, I stood there for a long minute, staring at nothing, trying to process the fact that a man I had never met before tonight had just informed me that my marriage had been a joke for the last 6 months. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. I spent the next 15 minutes standing in my living room, trying to figure out what a normal person was supposed to do after finding out their wife had a boyfriend. There was no manual for this. No step-by-step guide. Just me, staring at the wall, trying to decide if this was the moment where I was supposed to dramatically pack a bag and storm out or if I should just sit down and pretend my brain wasn't melting. Then I realized something. Rachel didn't know that I knew. Daniel, in all his genius, had come to me first, which meant Rachel was still out in the world, blissfully unaware that her secret had been delivered to my doorstep by the most pathetic messenger imaginable. That was an opportunity. Now, I could have done what most people do in these situations, wait for her to come home, sit her down, and have an emotional conversation where she cried and I asked, why, like a moron, as if there was ever a satisfying answer to that question. But I wasn't most people. I had a much better idea. I went to the bedroom, pulled open her closet, and grabbed one of her suitcases. Not because I was leaving, no, that would be too simple. I just needed it for effect. I unzipped it, placed it in the middle of the bed, and then sat down on the edge of the mattress, hands folded, waiting. Rachel came home half an hour later, humming some tune like she was the happiest woman on earth. She kicked off her shoes in the hallway, walked into the bedroom, and then froze when she saw the suitcase. Her eyes flicked to me. What's going on? I gestured toward the suitcase. I figured I'd save you the trouble. She blinked. What? I sighed. Rachel, if you're gonna leave me, you might as well do it now. Saves us both some time. There was a pause. A long, beautiful pause where I could actually see her brain trying to figure out how much I knew. She wasn't panicking yet, but there was a flicker of hesitation, like a deer debating whether or not it was about to get hit by a truck. What are you talking about? She asked. I smiled. That's cute. That little moment where you pretend like you have no idea what I mean. Really, Rachel, you should have gone into acting. She let out a breath. Alexander, if you have something to say, just say it. I leaned back on my hands, nodding. All right. Daniel came by. Her whole body stiffened. Ah, there it was. He's an interesting guy, I continued. Bit of a coward, but, he did what he thought was right in the end. I guess you could say he had an epiphany. He came to tell me all about your little 6-month adventure. Real stand-up guy. Rachel's jaw tightened. I can explain. Oh, I bet you can. She sat down on the bed, her hands gripping the edge. I didn't mean for it to happen. I snorted. Yeah, because affairs just happen. You trip, you fall, and whoops, you land in another guy's life. That's how it works, right? Her face twisted. You don't understand. No, Rachel, you don't understand. I shot back. See, if you had just left me, I would have respected that. If you had walked in here 6 months ago and said, hey, Alexander, I don't love you anymore. I want to be with someone else, I would have been upset. But at least I wouldn't be sitting here wondering how long you've been lying to my face. She rubbed her temples. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about you. I laughed. Actually laughed. That's rich. Really? So, let me get this straight. You threw away our marriage for a guy who just dumped you behind your back, and I'm supposed to believe it wasn't about me. She flinched. Oh, that was interesting. I sat up straight. Wait a minute. You didn't know, did you? Rachel said nothing. My grin widened. Oh, Rachel. You poor thing. He didn't tell you, did he? You thought everything was fine. You thought he was still in this with you. Still nothing. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Wow, that's awkward. Her hands clenched into fists. You're enjoying this. Oh, immensely, I admitted. Because, for once, I'm not the fool in the situation. You are. She shot up from the bed, pacing the room like she was trying to find an exit that wasn't there. I didn't plan this. Right? You just accidentally had a second relationship. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Rachel, I said, standing up. Give me the grand explanation. The big reveal. I want to hear it. I want to hear how my wife decided to juggle two men like some kind of sitcom character, only to end up with neither of them. She turned to face me, her expression a mix of frustration and something that almost looked like regret. I was unhappy. I rolled my eyes. Oh, groundbreaking. A married person felt unhappy. Never heard that one before. Alexander. No, seriously, I interrupted. You know what people usually do when they're unhappy? They talk to their spouse. They go to therapy. They take up a new hobby. What they don't do is start a relationship on the side and hope it just magically doesn't explode. Rachel crossed her arms. You think you're so perfect, don't you? I laughed again. Oh, I know I'm not perfect. But you know what I didn't do? Cheat on my wife and get dumped in the process. So, really, Rachel, this isn't my humiliation. It's yours. She shook her head. I didn't come home tonight expecting this. Yeah, well, neither did I said. But here we are. Silence again. Rachel ran a hand through her hair, looking like she was deciding whether or not to keep fighting. Then, finally, she exhaled. So, what now? I shrugged. That's up to you. You want the suitcase? Take it. You want to grovel and beg for forgiveness? Not sure that's going to work out for you. Her lips pressed together. I didn't want it to end like this. I smirked. That's funny, because I don't think you wanted it to end at all. And judging by the way she looked away, I knew I was right. Rachel stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed together so tightly I half expected her to snap in half from sheer tension. I had to admit, this was fascinating. The way she was running through every possible move in her head, trying to figure out if there was some miraculous way out of this. The problem was, there wasn't. She had already lost. She just didn't want to admit it yet. You're quiet, I said. That's a first. She exhaled sharply through her nose. What do you want me to say, Alexander? Oh, I don't know. Maybe something in the ballpark of, I deeply regret making the foolish decision of my life and would like to formally apologize for wasting your time. Rachel closed her eyes, shaking her head like she was trying to summon patience. I don't need your sarcasm right now. That's unfortunate because you're getting it either way. She let out a long breath, clearly trying to keep herself from snapping. I get it, okay? You're angry. Oh, good. You still have some basic awareness left. She ignored that. I don't know how to fix this. I raised an eyebrow. That's assuming there's something to fix. That made her pause. I could see the panic creeping in now. It was subtle, just a flicker in her eyes, the way her fingers twitched slightly at her sides, but it was there. She had walked in expecting a fight, maybe even a dramatic argument that would lead to some kind of emotionally charged reconciliation. But what she wasn't prepared for was me being completely and utterly done. Rachel wasn't used to not having control. That was her thing, always steering the situation, always being the one who decided when and how things went down. And now, for the first time, she had no say in what happened next. I stretched my arms over my head. So, what's the plan, Rachel? Are we going for the "this was a mistake" speech? The "I didn't mean to hurt you" monologue? Maybe the "it didn't mean anything" classic. She rubbed her temples. You're impossible. And yet, I'm the one who wasn't sneaking around behind my spouse's back. Wild how that works. Her jaw clenched. I didn't do this to hurt you. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh, well, that makes it so much better. I was unhappy, Alexander. She snapped. Yeah, I got that part already, I said, nodding. What you keep forgetting is that normal adults talk about being unhappy. They don't cheat and hope the problem magically disappears. Rachel was silent. For the first time, I saw it, that tiny flicker of regret. Not just for what she did, but for the fact that it had all fallen apart in the most humiliating way possible. She didn't feel bad for me. She felt bad for herself. So, Daniel dumped you, I mused, watching her closely. That must sting. Rachel's face barely changed, but the way she swallowed a little too hard told me everything I needed to know. I grinned. Oh, that's adorable. You actually thought he was going to stick around, didn't you? She said nothing. You had this whole fantasy in your head. You were going to leave me, ride off into the sunset with your new guy, and start some fresh, exciting life where you were the main character. And then, bam, reality check. He ditches you before you even get a chance to throw your big dramatic goodbye. I shook my head. That's gotta hurt. Her fingers curled into fists. I don't need you rubbing it in. Oh, but I do need to rub it in, Rachel, I said. Because for months, you've been playing me for a fool. And now that it's all blown up in your face, you expect me to be the bigger person? No thanks. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, finally, she sat down on the edge of the bed. So, what now? I shrugged. That's your problem. She looked up at me, frowning. You're just going to walk away? Walk away from what, exactly? I asked. A marriage that you checked out of half a year ago? A woman who clearly had no issue lying to my face every day? Yeah, Rachel, I'm gonna go ahead and walk away from that. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. I shook my head. You don't get it, do you? You've already lost me. The moment Daniel knocked on that door, whatever chance you had of fixing this was gone. Rachel was silent again. For once, she had nothing to say. I grabbed my phone off the dresser. I'll send you the details for the divorce lawyer. She flinched at the word. That's it. I let out a breath. Yeah, Rachel. That's it. And for the first time since she walked through that door, she actually looked like she understood just how badly she had screwed this up. Rachel sat there, blinking like she had just been hit over the head with a frying pan. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered she was the one who had been juggling two relationships like she was starring in some low-budget soap opera. And suddenly, my sympathy disappeared. She cleared her throat. So, you're serious? I sighed. Rachel, do I look like I'm joking? She shifted uncomfortably. I mean, this is kind of sudden. I stared at her. Sudden? You've been having a whole second relationship for half a year, and you think this is sudden? She pressed her lips together. That's not what I meant. Then please, enlighten me. What did you mean? She hesitated, looking at the suitcase I had so generously provided. I don't know. I just thought. I don't know. I raised an eyebrow. You thought I'd do what, exactly? Cry? Beg you to stay? Give you some dramatic speech about how we can fix this? Rachel, I'm not a character in one of your terrible romance movies. She winced. You don't have to be tough. Oh, I don't have to be tough? I let out a short laugh. Rachel, you've been lying to me for 6 months, and suddenly, I'm the bad guy for not handling this with grace and dignity? Yeah, no. You don't get to decide how I react. She exhaled, running a hand through her hair. I didn't think this would happen like this. Of course, you didn't, I said. Because in your head, you were in control of everything. You got to have your little side relationship. You got to come home and play the loving wife. And you thought that as long as nobody found out, everything would be fine. And now that it's all crumbling, you're acting shocked that there are consequences. Rachel looked away. I made a mistake. I snorted. That's an understatement. She was quiet for a moment, then finally looked back at me. So that's it? You're just done. I crossed my arms. Yeah, Rachel. I'm done. She swallowed. You're really not even going to try? That almost made me laugh. Try what? Fix something you destroyed? Put in effort for a marriage that you didn't respect? No, thanks. I'll pass. She fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. I don't know where to go. I shrugged. Not my problem. Her jaw tightened. You don't have to be so, what? Direct? Honest. I interrupted. Rachel, the time for politeness ended the moment Daniel showed up at my door. She sighed, rubbing her temples. I thought we had something worth fighting for. That was rich. Oh, now our marriage is worth fighting for? Where was that energy when you were sneaking around with Daniel? She flinched. I wasn't thinking. I shook my head. No, you were thinking. You just weren't thinking about me. More silence. Rachel looked like she wanted to say something else, but for once in her life, she actually seemed to realize that nothing she said would make this better. I turned, walking toward the door. You can take the suitcase or not. I really don't care. But I'm done with this conversation. She didn't stop me. For once, she had nothing to say. Rachel didn't move. She just sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor like she was trying to come up with a magical solution that didn't exist. I stood by the door, watching her, waiting to see if she'd say something worthwhile before I walked out. She didn't. All right then, I said, clapping my hands together. I guess that's that. She looked up. That's really it? I tilted my head. Didn't we just go over this? Or do I need to draw a diagram? Her face twisted. This isn't funny, Alexander. I raised an eyebrow. Rachel, you don't get to decide when it stops being funny. That's my call now. She sighed. I don't know what to do. I laughed. That's funny, because you seem to have everything so figured out 6 months ago. She ignored that. I mean it, Alexander. I don't know where to go. That's not my problem, I said. I'm not your backup plan. Rachel stared at me, something flickering behind her eyes. You really don't care. I exhaled. Rachel, you want to know when I stopped caring? About 20 minutes ago when I realized that the only reason you're upset is because Daniel dumped you before you could dump me. She flinched. Bingo. I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms. If he had stuck around, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, would we? You would have kept lying to my face, sneaking around, and pretending everything was fine until the day you decided you were ready to trade me in. That was your plan, wasn't it? Her silence told me everything. I nodded. Yeah, that's what I thought. She swallowed hard. I didn't. Save it, I said, cutting her off. I really don't need to hear whatever sad excuse you're about to come up with. Rachel rubbed her temples, looking like she was trying to keep herself from snapping. I know I messed up, okay? I get it. Oh, now you get it? I said. Fantastic. That only took a total collapse of your personal life. She exhaled sharply. Are you going to keep making jokes? Yes. She sighed, shaking her head. You're impossible. I grinned. And yet, I'm not the one getting dumped twice in one night. Her jaw clenched. I was hoping we could be. I don't know. Civil. I raised an eyebrow. Civil? After this? Rachel, you're lucky I'm not throwing a party. She didn't respond to that. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Look, here's the deal. I'll have a lawyer draft up the divorce papers. You'll sign them, we'll split what we need to, and we'll be done. Rachel swallowed. That's really it? What were you expecting? I asked. A heartfelt goodbye? A slow-motion hug? Maybe one last passionate kiss before we dramatically go our separate ways. She frowned. You don't have to be so tough. I shrugged. Sure, I do. Because here's the thing, Rachel, you don't actually feel bad about what you did. You feel bad that you lost. She didn't say anything. I checked my watch. All right, well, this has been fun, but I think I've spent enough of my night giving you a reality check. Rachel looked at me, almost like she wanted to argue. Then, finally, she let out a slow breath. Fine. I smirked. Well, no long speech? No last-minute plea? Color me impressed. She shot me a glare but said nothing. I turned for the door, then paused. Oh, and Rachel? She looked up. I smiled. Next time you cheat, maybe don't pick a guy who folds under pressure. Just a thought. She didn't have a response to that. I walked out. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt free. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel